welcome back to the special transmission on Youm-e-Istehsal Kashmir. I'm Farrukh Pitafi, continuing from the last hour, and we are talking about this important day where 4 years ago India abrogated unilaterally and illegally abolished Article 370, the article that gave statehood and special autonomous status to Jammu and Kashmir, Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, and then also abolished Article 35A. If you have seen our previous session, I explained in detail how it is illegal as per India's own laws as well, because they had to change the meaning of a constituent assembly which ceased to exist since 1957 without abolishing Article 370. But having said that, after that we have to talk about other aspects as well, and we have to see why is it that it took Indian Supreme Court 4 years to actually focus on these matters. We are going to talk about these matters now in the program, and in order to help us understand these issues in the studio, I'm joined by Dr Awais Bin Wasi, who is Kashmir Expert. Thank you very much, Dr. Saab, for being part of the program. Well, next to him is Hafiz Ahsaan Ahmad khokhar, who is Advocate Supreme Court, will help us understand the legal aspects of the matter. Thank you very much, Hafiz Saab, for being part of the program as well. And our third guest joins us on Skype. Dr. Munawar Hussain is an expert on foreign affairs. Thank you very much, Dr. Saab, for being part of the program as well. With your permission, let me start with the studio. Dr. Awais, let me ask you, what is the significance of observing this day? And what does it mean when you talk about not only 370, but 35A? What does it mean for Kashmiris?
This 5th of August 2019, this is in fact a Black Day, and today it is being observed throughout the world where Kashmiris are living in Pakistan and across the world. And the significance, as you have asked, is so that India, though in 1947, on 27th of October, landed the forces and occupied that region, but in 5th of August 2019, it violated all the principles, United Nations resolutions, United Nations Charter, bilateral agreements, practices of international law. Yeah. So all these things have been blatantly violated, and not only these things, but India's own constitution, which does not allow that this 370 and 35A could be revoked in such a manner. Yeah. So in this way, this kind of high-handedness on the part of India by observing this day must be projected across the world, so that the concerned quarters should understand that how grave the situation is in Jammu and Kashmir.
And that's why we are doing it, right?
Exactly.
Now, 35A,
in fact, it was enacted in 1935, 1927 by the then Maharaja, and it was basically meant to protect the employment rights of the local Kashmiris, because even at that time some foreigners, they were coming in Jammu and Kashmir, and they were seeking employment and scholarship availing they were. Yeah. So in order to protect the local ones, this law was in fact enacted there, and since then it was part of Jammu and Kashmir constitution.
Right. But and correct me if I'm wrong, it is a bulwark against the demographic change in Kashmir as well. It was supposed to be that, so that for people from outside Kashmir don't change the demography of the local population.
Exactly, because according to this law, no outsider, non-Kashmiri can buy land. So this is the the salient provision of that.
Yeah. And after that, we have seen also the domicile law, that essentially, and issuance of 300,000 or 400,000 domiciles to non-native, non-Kashmiris actually.
Exactly, because
the purpose is to change the population.
This thing must be understood, that this is not a gift by India that has been given to the people of Kashmir. People of Kashmir, they have struggled, and after that this law was enacted. Yeah. And once this law was removed, it was meant to bring about the demographic change in Jammu and Kashmir, and the developments that we have seen after 5th of August 2009, the issuance of domicile to the non-Kashmiris and amendment in different acts and different policies with regard to give land and other opportunities to the Indians. I think these developments indicate that this move was not what India claimed, what Amit Shah, while making a speech in Lok Sabha in 2019, while introducing this Bill Reorganization Act, he was saying that this 370, in fact, this was one of the major obstacles in the development, in the progress in Jammu and Kashmir. And this is important, this revocation is important to alleviate poverty in Jammu and Kashmir. But when we see the developments after 4 years, these all claims, they are ended in smoke.
Right. And the purpose, of course, is that no matter what you say about a plebiscite, if they are going to change the very constitution, very composition of the population, then of course they can go for any kind of plebiscite, and that plebiscite will support Indian side. So it is a clever plot, but unfortunately, or fortunately, it doesn't seem to be taking off. Let me actually bring in Hafiz Ahsaan khokhar. Sir, you are an advocate Supreme Court, so I'm going to ask you about Indian Supreme Court as well, because it seems that the law, the way it was amended, the way it was changed through a presidential order. And Article 370 actually says that without consultation with the Constituent Assembly of Kashmir, you cannot change it. And they changed the meaning of that, and after that, when Constituent Assembly was read as the Legislative Assembly, they found out that they don't have a Legislative Assembly either, or a representative government of Kashmiris. And in the end, it was all decided in New Delhi. So if it is such a blatant violation of Indian Constitution itself, why is it that it has taken Indian Supreme Court 4 years to even start hearing the case?
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Pitafi sab, thank you very much for inviting me on this special occasion. And I start with the words that every day for the Kashmiris is a dark day. And it keeps continuing since 1947, when illegally Maharaja Hari Singh made the accession against the wishes of the India and against the subcontinent division plan, which was basically that those states which have more than 500 states at that time, where the populations is either, if they are the Hindus in the majority, they would join the India, and if there is a Muslim majority states, they would join the Pakistan. So that the controversy starts from 1947 and it keeps on. Then I am dividing my argument to build on this issue on 3 areas. One is the commitments made by the Indian government and their leaders, the Jawaharlal Nehru, to the United Security Council, and then their commitment made to the Kashmiris as well while making the Constitution of India in 1949. And then there was the consecutive commitments by the Indian government to the Jammu and Kashmir people that they will be given equal right and opportunities while they are living in the United India. So the first one, I come on the point that while making the 1949 Constitution, there was to some extent shown the Jawaharlal's consent that the status of the Kashmiris will not be changed. And that's why the interim provisions of the Article 370 was introduced in the Constitution by giving assurance to the Kashmiris that there will be a separate Constitution, there will be a separate form of system of government, and there will be a separate flag as well.
Yeah, but that provisional status actually was revoked in 2018 when Supreme Court itself agreed that because the Constituent Assembly went away
Pitafi sir,
without
another-
requesting the abolition of Article
we are
370.
now you're talking about on the second side. The second
No,
side
I
is,
know, but I just wanted to
yeah,
qualify
the first side,
that even the very Supreme Court that we are questioning right now had already ruled that it is now a permanent feature of Indian
they
Constitution.
have decided in 2018. I'm coming on the point.
Yeah.
I'm coming on the point. They have decided the case of the Article 370 only on the two grounds. One ground is that basically the 370 was the conditional with the ground of the opinion of the Constituent Assembly, and that Constituent Assembly was dissolved before taking any decision either into the abrogation or confirmation or revocation of the Article 370. So this was basically the ground, the striking ground to pull on the point that the Article 370 has to the extent of the temporary purposes, it is a permanent status, and as a permanent status means you can't apply the Indian laws to the Indian occupied Kashmir, and you can't change the demography as well. Because you spoke about the Article 335A. 35A was also introduced in 1954 in pursuance of the Delhi Agreement 1952 between the Kashmiris and by the Indian government.
Right.
So when they revoked in 2019 the Article 370, the consequent was they automatically revoked the Article 35A, because 370A was a temporary legislation in the article, gave a permanent status by the Indian Supreme Court as well, and Article 35 was introduced in the presidential order at that time in 1954, and it was also on the basis of that you can't change the demographic of the Kashmiris. They have the right to for the employment, and they have a right to design the most important thing, they have the right to design the who is the resident of the Kashmiris. Now India is altogether doing the on the
but my question, Dr. Hafiz Saab, once again is regarding Indian Supreme Court's refusal to hear the case for 4 years. Can you answer the reply to that?
The issue is simple. The issue is simple. First, there is a decision of the Supreme Court all the time there that they have decided about the status of the Article 370, number one. And number two is the point is the attitude, the mindset. I mean, you can't say the Indian Supreme Court is so independent, they talk about the Kashmiris and they have
this
a
is the
time
problem.
issues.
This is the problem.
This is the problem.
In
But
75
now-
years, every time we kept on saying that Pakistan wants to be a democracy, they said no, India is a democracy.
No, this is no absolutely
Democracies
not.
usually have.
I mean, you are saying
Hafiz Saab, allow me to actually just add to what I was saying. Supreme Courts usually are very effective in any democracy, and you are telling me that India's Supreme Court is Schrodinger's Supreme Court. It is alive, but it is also dead right now.
No, you have seen it. You have seen it. If, for the sake of argument, that for earlier, all the laws of the India, they were not applied before the revocation of Article 370, and from the 372 onwards, the miseries of the Kashmiris they have started in more.
Right.
I mean, there are more casualties, more. I mean, the widows over there, the more rapes case over there.
Absolutely,
more
absolutely. Allow me to actually bring in Dr. Munawar Hussain, who has been patiently waiting for his turn. Dr. Munawar Hussain, you can talk about what was said earlier, but my question is regarding the response of the world community towards what happened 4 years ago. Initially, we thought that there was some hope, but eventually now everybody seems to treat it as a foregone conclusion. So your comment on that, and how can we change that impunity, global as well India's own? Dr. Saab, you'll have to unmute your mic. It seems that you're on mute. Please go ahead.
I am audible now?
Yes, sir. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I was saying that because of international politics, we see special status of India and appeasement which is given to Indian behavior and their policies within a country, in Kashmir, in the region. Therefore, Indians' behavior is an arrogant behavior. And the problem in our side is that our narrative is not as strong as the Indian narrative is. And the reason behind it that we don't have presence in the centers of international information, like we don't have a presence in New York, in Washington, D.C., in Paris. Even we cannot hit the Qatar. And our media centers are not at the level which can hit the uh, uh, the media of
Indian
international
side.
media.
Okay,
So
right.
I believe that we have to work on narrative making, and it has to be very effective. And the process of dissemination of it has to be effective again.
All right.
Secondly, I would like to say that the policies which the Modi government has adopted, which usually I call Muditwa, which is the latest form of the Lutwa, these policies are giving shocks to India even. For instance, if you see the President Obama's interview on CNN, he predicted that India would be disintegrated if they continue such policies because there is fragmentation in Indian society. And once there is fragmentation, inquisitiveness at societal level, it means it can even discourage the investors to come into India. And
Right.
now, if you look at the economic position of India, though it was progressing with the ratio of 6% of GDP growth rate, but now it is declining because of floods and because of instability, and it is downgraded up to 2%, and it is very difficult to maintain it.
Right.
Reason because of flood, because agriculture sector is unfortunately hit very badly, and agriculture is just performing 40%. Its contribution in
Right.
Indian GDP
Dr.
is
Saab,
up to
I understand the consequences that might be for India, but you brought up President Obama and his interview. The only problem with such statements is that these statements are given once they are not in office. When he was in office, it was all jadoo ki jappi, magical embraces and hugs. So now the biggest problem right now with the state of affairs is that regardless of what happens to India, India, by the way, keeps on pejoratively called it Tukde Tukde gang. But let us talk about Kashmir, sir. At this moment, you said that Pakistan lacks in certain aspects regarding media's advocacy and international advocacy. How can we change that, sir?
by having a presence in the centers of information. For instance, there are number of chairs in Oxford, in universities of Germany, in universities of England, but
Yeah.
these chairs are vacant. So who will make the narrative? And
Right.
secondly, if you see in America, there is a special institution which construct the narrative. For instance, I mean, it was clear cut, rather I would say it was a gross violation of international law when Americans, they attacked Iraq. It was preemptive strike. But even then, the way it was justified by Condoleezza Rice, the then Secretary of State, it was, I mean, excellent. So
Right.
we have to work on a center which can construct a very effective narrative as per the time, which is the need of the time.
Right, and that is
Secondly,
an
you said,
excellent answer. Hold your thought there.
Farrukh.
Let me come back to the studio. And Dr. West, let me ask you, every answer that starts with "we have to" actually proves that we haven't done it already. And my concern immediately is, why haven't we done it? We have been talking about this for 76 years, especially these 4 years. Why is it that the main advocates of the cause or the case are not doing enough?
You know, this the concern is quite legitimate that has just been raised about the
Cheers.
the the advocacy which is needed.
Yeah.
You know, the first thing is that this kind of advocacy, I think that after 75 years, there are, for example, that after 75 years, there is an institution, a part of institution that was developed, India Study Center,
Yeah.
in one of our think tanks. I think it should have been established quite earlier. Second thing is that understanding India is unfortunately quite poor in Pakistan.
Do we
need
have a
to
Kashmir Study Center?
Kashmir Study Centers, they are there, but
Where?
In Azad Kashmir, there are Kashmir Study Center. In Punjab University, there is a Department of Kashmir Studies.
Okay.
But unfortunately, that these institutions, they must be revitalized, and they must be you know, renewed or re-established in such a way that they could play-
Re-resourced as well,
Re-resourced
because
as well.
right now when I go to JSTOR and I type in Kashmir word, right, most of the authors that I see are Indian.
Exactly. That is, and not only the Indians. If for example, you see one example that I can give is
Yeah.
that Pandit community in Kashmiri.
Yeah.
They have also produced a lot of literature, you know. And if you Google it, you will find a lot of books, research papers, publications written by Pandits. But when we see the indigenous voices, now after 2008, we have seen there are some books which have been written. For example, that Mirza Waheed, he has written The Collaborator, The Book of Gold Leaves, and Basharat Peer
was
has written
Mirza-
Curfewed Night.
Was Mirza, you know, Mirza not picked up by the authorities?
No, because he is not based in Kashmir
Yeah, but
currently.
when he was there, he was picked up, right?
Yes, at that time when initially he was
Yeah.
perhaps
Yeah.
because he was a journalist initially,
Yeah.
later on he turned out to be a creative writer.
Yeah.
And Shehnaz Bashir, he wrote Scattered Souls, and earlier if you see Agha Shahid Ali, The Country Without a Post Office,
Yeah,
Rooms
but
Are
the
Never Finished. So
energy
these
is
are-
coming from the other side of the divide, not from our side. right?
Exactly. This is
Why
this-
is it that it is not actually coming
that
from
is
here?
a matter of concern, and that is, I think, the area that we need to work out, that those people who are living in conflict, those people who are living in a situation which is not favorable in any way, but they are producing it.
Yeah.
But when it comes to our universities, when it comes to our institutes in Azad Jammu and Kashmir, when we compare it, the situation is unfortunately bleak. And until and unless we produce indigenous narrative, I think that buyers and takers of this narrative would be lesser.
There will be difficulty. Now, two very important questions that were highlighted by our worthy guest, Dr. Munawar. One, regarding the vacant chairs all over the world, and that is an issue that we have been hearing about for quite some time, right? And the second one is, of course, you know, one dossier that Pakistan issued regarding Kashmir a couple of years ago. It was full of compelling evidence. But the question then is, why is it that we haven't been able to educate people around the world about it? Dr. Saab, very quickly. Yeah.
You know, the dossier that we have presented and different letters written by Ministry of Foreign Affairs, I think they are quite well documented. I have gone through all these letters and the documentary evidences. But the, you know, I think that we need to pitch our argument and advance our argument in such a way that that could be taken by the concerned quarters. Earlier, what happened was that we established 3 centers, Kashmir centers. One center that was established in Washington, the Kashmir Center in Washington, the other was in Brussels, and the third one was in UK. But unfortunately, those centers, again, you know, they have to a certain extent they have played their role. I think much needs to be done to revitalize their role. Another dimension that
They don't have money, they don't have resources, or what exactly
I think
is the problem?
the issue is not of money, the issue is of the academic resources,
Okay.
the intellectual resources,
Okay.
people who could write and who could produce things in the idiom of the day.
Okay.
And the things which
People
could
like
be,
you.
which could be acceptable, which
So
could be
basically
acceptable.
people like you.
I'm not saying
So
me.
people, no, but I'm saying this, right? When we have access to such resources, why is it that they can't be sent there?
You know, this is, for example, that when we say, for example, one example I can give.
Yeah.
The 2018 and 2019 United Nations Office of High Commission released 2 very important reports.
Yeah.
They have certain data,
Right.
and that data is basically collected by the local Kashmiris, and those 2 reports are based on the primary data. Secondly, if you see, if for example after 2008, there was a rise of indigenous and peaceful uprising of the people of Kashmir, and at the same time we have seen the intellectual discourse in along with the intifada in Jammu and Kashmir.
Yeah.
And after that, this intifada, the peaceful struggle as well as the intellectual discourse, we see the you know, our stories, they have been appeared in New York Times,
Yeah.
in Guardian, in Western media, because of that.
But
Another one.
But with due respect, that becomes an outlier. You cannot sustain that trend, right? And that becomes a problem. you have, you can get through to a newspaper once in a while, but then the ability to sustain it is lacking. Allow me to actually go to Hafiz Saab, because Hafiz Saab has been waiting for a while now. Hafiz Saab, let me once again talk about the legal matters. And we are talking about human rights. We are told every time we talk about Kashmir issue that India is a lucrative market, it is influential, and that's why Western democracies, do not see the violations in Kashmir. The problem is that the status of a human being does not change just because their oppressors might be rich or influential. Why is it that international community has been silent, and how can we actually bring about a change in their approach, especially through legal means?
But Hafiz, first, before answering your question, I'm coming on the point, the present pending proceeding before the Supreme Court of India regarding the status of Article 370 and the 35A of the Indian Constitution. Being a student of law and practicing in Supreme Court of Pakistan, I am seeing this is a case, is an open and shut case, and there are very bright chances even in under the Constitution of India, because there are certain provisions in the Constitution which was given on the commitment by their forefathers and the framers of the Constitution at that time, and they keeps intact for the last 75 years since 2019, when it was revoked unilaterally by the Indian government without adopting even the due procedure which was given at that time under the Constitution, and there was an earlier judgment of the Supreme Court of the India. So it would be very difficult for the Indian Supreme Court to earlier reverse their judgment and to pass a judgment which is contrary to the law and the Constitution and the commitments made by the Indian governments and their politicians. Now the proceedings are started over there. It was started on the 2nd of August over there, and they are keep saying that it will be continued on daily to daily basis. And I hope so that the Indian Supreme Court will strike down the revocation of the Modi's government, Article 370, and the invocation of the 6th of the Presidential Order of 2019 by adding such an application of the certain laws outside the Indian territory to the independent status of the Jammu and Kashmir. And even they have divided the Kashmir into two areas, the Jammu and Kashmir and the Ladakh, because of the 6th of their presidential order. So they are bright chances, being the student of law and as well being observers of the Supreme Court's proceeding, that the Supreme Court of India will definitely listen the voices of the Kashmiris and will uphold the already decision by made by them and the Jawaharlal.
And I'm really glad that you are so aspirational. But let me actually bring you back to reality. Now, if you remember the Afzal Guru case, at that time also it was thought it is an open and shut case. But what did the Indian Supreme Court do? It said that because the demand or people's demand for this blood has to be actually fulfilled, they did it.
Why I am saying
it took the Indian Supreme Court 4 years, sir.
Definitely. I mean, you can't expect from the Indian Supreme Court that they are more proactive for the protection of the human rights of the Jammu and Kashmir. This is another story.
Can't be.
No,
you can't expect
that. They can't be. If
why not? Human beings live in Kashmir.
No, human beings being live. And you have seen the case of the Yasin Malik as well there. What the Indian justice system have done with him, without any evidence, without framing a formal charge.
So if a change cannot come from within India,
but to some extent,
can you answer my earlier question as well? How can you enforce or ensure that international community does something that if the change cannot come from within, it can come from without?
Primarily, the responsibility lies in two sides. One is the responsibility lies with the United Nations, because the United Nations is the grantor of the rightful plebiscite in Indian occupied Kashmir and the Pakistani side as well. But the second problem is on our side, but that on the Pakistani side, we need to have a certain strategy for approaching the international forums like the European Union, like the OIC, and the other organizations.
All the bodies that you have mentioned,
Yeah,
none of them is a legal body.
No, because they have the on the do side now there is the
I
international
thought
Court
that
of-
you are going to say ICJ,
No,
but the problem is that needs consent from
no,
both
no,
sides.
no, ICJ, the jurisdiction of ICJ, we need to have the submission of the jurisdiction
Yeah.
if you go over there. But the other side, it is very important area, that is the International Criminal Court of Justice, because there are so many violations which have taken
No,
place
hang on,
for the
hang on.
last many years. in
Hang on,
Indian
hang on.
Yeah.
Are either of India or Pakistan
Yeah.
signatory to ICC?
But we can go over there, we can ask them, the Indians at the Indian diaspora, the Kashmiris, they are, we can approach them. Even Pakistan is not the signatory of the International Criminal Court of
This
Justice.
is what
on
I
our
said.
side.
Either of
But-
them are.
But the issue is at the moment is the first, it is a responsibility as a Pakistani to make their case before any forum which required for redressal of their grievances regarding their violation of the human rights. This is the first thing. The second important thing, we need to have a consistent strategy to follow up these areas, like to improve our diplomatic areas, like to improve the approach of the area which we have earlier pointed out, the research work, the documents, and the public awareness is the most important
But
area.
Hafiz Saab, when you talk to the ambassadors abroad, they actually overwhelmed you with evidence that they have been doing everything possible under the sun. But the other side has immense lobbying power, and that might be impeding the progress.
No,
How do you actually change that?
they actually change. We need to change our strategy as well. This is not a
What
strategy.
what kind of strategy do you
on
need?
three sides? One strategy is we need to strengthen ourselves inner side. We have to self-sufficient on that. We can speak on the same footing. This is a most important area. Then we need to have
So basically, we have to get rich, equally rich, and then we can do it.
equally rich, and to have a courage to say that this is the illegal action and we need to rectify it, because in view of the commitments made by the India to the United Nations. The second would be we need to engage our friends, the international friends. We need to engage that this is a big issue, the flashpoint issue for the last many years on the United Nations. We need to, because we are a peace-loving country as well,
Right.
simultaneously.
Hafiz Saab, is lawfare a strategy or an option?
Yes, definitely, there is a strategy. If
What is stopping us from actually waging it?
they will need to change our priorities as well. We not need to only on the highlights on the human rights issues, but we need to change the priorities by holding the plebiscite in the area which was committed by both sides in the United Nations.
I will like to actually contest your opinion about us not doing enough, or the matter of priorities, but with your respect, if you switch on any private channel right now, Kashmir is the last thing they are reporting. They are reporting something else, right?
Definitely.
So the matter of priorities is there.
To the extent of
I'm conceding.
No, the matter of priority is we should have been the consistent on this side.
Yeah.
The consistency on this side.
For
if
4 years we are consistent.
No,
What
the
have we
four-
done?
no.
We have said that if Article 370 is theirs,
Yeah.
they can
No,
do whatever they want.
But
We
Hafiz
keep
Saab,
on invoking Shimla Agreement.
even if you talk about the Article 370, Pakistan never recognized the Article 370.
but Pakistan
because
is a
it is
Pakistan is-
against the United Nations resolution.
Dr. Saab, Pakistan is a signatory to Shimla Agreement, right?
Yeah.
Which actually talks about not changing status quo
Yeah.
unilaterally
Yeah.
on either side.
Yeah.
So that is why we have been actually advocating this. So Article 370 was part of the status quo. It becomes our headache
No,
because of the Shimla Agreement.
It was prior to the Shimla Agreement. That was
No, but this is what I'm saying. It
Yeah.
is part of the status quo
Yeah.
that was inherited by Shimla Agreement.
But I'm coming on the point, then we
Yeah,
go on.
I have to actually go to Dr.
Article
Munawar.
370 was not a permanent article introduced in the Indian Constitution. It was the interim arrangement, because there was recently at that time the United Nations resolution, and it was shown by the Indian government that there will be a plebiscite, and for the time being,
Yeah.
there would be the independent constitution, independent flag, and independent governance of system. Then the Indian government retreated from their
I
stance,
get it.
and then came on the point.
Believe me, throughout the day we have been actually recounting history, but my problem is that once you change to 370
Yeah.
And statehood is gone, it becomes union territory and bifurcated
Yeah.
at that. then you abolish 35A, and then you actually bring in domicile law that essentially changes the population itself. And even after, if you change the population, even if you hold the plebiscite, if you hold the plebiscite, that would say something else. It won't reflect the aspiration of common people.
That's why.
So it is a blatant, violation of human rights.
That's why.
So you have to do something about it.
That's why the Pakistani government is keep saying and condemning the revocation of the Article 370 and 35A of the Constitution, because it is going to change the status in terms of the governance and the demographic as well.
Absolutely. Dr. Munawar Hussain, do you think that this condemnation is enough, or we have to do further more, especially on the legal grounds, because there seems to be a possibility that Pakistan can litigate this matter in ICJ through lawfare perhaps, or other forums?
Look, Farrukh, this special status was given in 1954 by the first Indian president, and it was the part and parcel of Jammu and Kashmir Constitution, which was made in 1824. And I strongly believe that without balancing the power of India, the Kashmiris won't be able to get independence. For instance, if you see the movements of independence in different parts of the world, including America, they could not win independence without the support of France. France balanced the power of Britain. And similarly, if you see the in Angola, without the support of Cuba, Angolians could not be able to get the independence. So I believe that without having balance of power in the case of Kashmir, Kashmiris won't be able to get, because 9 lakh Indian military, 1 military man against 7 Kashmiris. I mean, this is a very powerful presence. Therefore, different human rights organizations, humanitarian organizations, I mean, they are showing the concerns. Secondly,
can you qualify this notion, sir? Dr. Hazab, can you qualify this notion that balance of power will cure India of this oppressive, malady? Because my question is regarding the autonomy of a state in international order. When that country does not want to play ball, how do you, through balance of power, or for that matter, through international legal system, how do you bring in a change in their attitude?
Farrukh, balance of power does not mean, you have to provide them weapons and military men to get the independence. We have very good example of Palestinian. In 2021, when the Israelis attacked Palestinians, it was international journalism which contained Israelis, and they went back. And therefore, the Pakistani diaspora, the Kashmiri diaspora, they can help in this out. And Pakistani
but Palestine is also struggling, sir. Give me a successful example, right? They haven't actually found a resolution to Palestinian dispute, have they?
But at least, they forced Israeli forces to go back. They went back. And my point of view is that we can utilize diaspora. Without utilizing diaspora, we cannot win the support on the Kashmir. Secondly, I would like to say that since we are observing multipolar world, in multipolar world, different intergovernmental organizations, they are playing very important role. We can activate, OIC, many members of OIC, they are energy resource countries. Even the Indians, they are depending on their energy. So we can utilize it, and the government of Pakistan can think about it.
Yeah. But I see your point regarding something very interesting. When it comes to balance of power, maybe Pakistan cannot balance the Indian power. But if you factor in China, you brought up multipolar world, so then the balance kind of changes, or at least comes to an even keel. Let me very quickly come back to you, Dr. Awais. I'm told that we have to actually start concluding the program. So 1 minute each.
Sorry,
Dr. Munawar, allow me to actually first go to Dr. Awais, then I'm coming back to you. Please, sir.
One thing that, in conclusion, that I would definitely mention is that I think that we should, take stock of the situation after 4 years, and that thing should be projected. What India claimed in the beginning, in the, while revoking this article. And in terms of, politics, there is no political institutions in place, there is no assembly, there is no so-called polls. And in terms of economy, if you say it, economy is in doldrums, And the
Especially because of the lockdown.
unemployment, the data that I came across, that is 23%. In India, throughout India, the unemployment is 7.9%, and in Jammu and Kashmir, the unemployment is 23%. And during these 4 years, recent report, I think yesterday I came across that 1,000 women, they have been disappeared. So this is
actually the new number that I have seen is 10,000.
10,000, sorry.
Yeah.
10,000, 10,000, that number. So the thing is that, so if we, on Indian claims, for the sake of argument, if we see it and what they claimed and what they did practically, I think that must be projected.
Absolutely. Very quickly, Hafiz,
I will add one on the internal side. What the Kashmiris have the intention, what the youth is thinking about. There is a recent survey, and the recent survey has shown that the 91% of the students belonging to the Kashmir, they like to accession with Pakistan, and they think they are future with Pakistan. So this is the internal intention of the student of the Jammu and Kashmir. So the second point is there would be a 3 strategy. First, we should try it all our friends, our forums internationally and on the areas which up to the United Nations to stop the atrocities, the violations of the human rights in Jammu and Kashmir. The second would be to try our best for the implementation and execution of the United Nations by approaching all the forums, because this is the most appropriate way.
Enforcement of the resolution.
And the third is the most important way to have a strengthen of this level, to have a balancing act like you earlier point out with reference to the China.
Yeah, right. And that is important. Thank you very much for that comment. Dr. Munawar, your conclusion, sir, and you can now bring in your, earlier comment as well. Please go ahead.
Farrukh, I believe that international order is weak. United Nations cannot do anything because of American order and Chinese order. These 2 elephant orders have made the international order thin, which is based on norms. So therefore, what we need to do is that we have to use other multilateral forums like SCO. We have to be the part of BRICS, and we can put influence on India. And regarding Obama, you said that when they leave the office, they give such statements. This is a trend in American administration. Whenever, because of certain strategic interests, they cannot say anything directly to the country, they outsource the questions. And I think President Obama is not as unimportant personality. It is ex-president, and his information is supported by American intelligence.
I didn't want to actually cut you while you were making this comment, but let me remind you that while Obama might be saying whatever he is saying now, he was the US president who normalized Narendra Modi. Before his tenure, there was nobody who allowed Modi to enter America. And here you had a president who allowed him, who actually hugged him publicly and normalized him. So this is my beef with the man. Otherwise, I think very high of him. He has been a voice of sanity. But we have to actually conclude the program here. Dr. Munawar Hussain, thank you very much, sir, for your precious time. Dr. Awais, thank you very much, sir, for your precious time as well. Hafiz, Ahsaan, Ahmad, khokhar, we always somehow end up on the opposite side of a discussion, but perhaps that is the design of the program. And in spirit, we agree on the principles that actually are there. So we have to conclude the program. Thank you very much for all your presence. Viewers, you have listened to our participants. This transmission will continue, but I will conclude here. Thank you very much for watching. Let us hope in coming days the world community sees Kashmiris as equal human beings, as their own children, their own brothers, their own relatives. Without that, perhaps the world will not be able to overcome this impunity that we have been seeing, especially in the last 4 years, and particularly in 76 years. This was my segment. Thank you very much for watching. Take care.